Are you a manager who is eager to change the trajectory of your career? I have spent the last 23 years as a Fortune 50 leader learning from other industry leaders how to break free from limiting beliefs and habits. On the Might in Motion podcast, we focus on the 4 M's: motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. We bring you leaders from Fortune companies, doctors, and entrepreneurs. Their stories of living their own might in motion will inspire you to create your own action plan and achieve your goals. Welcome to Might in Motion. Today's episode of Might in Motion is brought to you by Pantheon FM, Fortunes Magnified. Pantheon FM is changing the world through entrepreneurship. In this community, you will find everything you need to create, amplify, and monetize your world-changing business. Join us at pantheon.community/register/LAUA. Today, I bring to you Clear Home Solutions CEO Marty Stevens-Heebner and her nationally accredited staff. Well, we're going to talk to her, but she's going to tell us all about her staff, who manage moves, downsizing, and online auctions for older adults and their families. A serial entrepreneur and author, Marty is also president of the National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers, also known as NASM. She holds certifications in senior move management, professional organizing, and aging in place, and hosts the podcast, How to Move Your Mom and Still Be on Speaking Terms Afterwards. Later Life Living, Marty's latest venture, is currently in the beta launch stage. Marty was inspired to work with older adults and their families after her own experiences helping her father, who made it to 90, and her aunt, who struggles with dementia. Marty, welcome to Might in Motion.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I am fired up about this conversation. We had a meet and greet. I listen to your podcast regularly, and you've got such a great energy that it fires me up. So
thank you so much.
I want to know your story. What brought you to the point where you are now, where you're helping seniors and their families navigate their later years?
You know, most people who work with older adults and their families come to it because they had their own personal experience, either with their own parents or their grandparents. And it's a special kind of person who gets drawn to this work. You have to have a lot of compassion, and empathy has to be built in. Plus, you just have to be really great at what you do. And so my mom died when she was only 58. Dad made it to 90, never remarried. She was the love of his life. He used to say, I slept up against your mother's butt for 35 years. So that was bad. He made it to 90. You know, it's funny. You know, when we were with doctors and they say, okay, so what did he die of? I said, he died of 90. He was allowed to go.
It's old.
Yeah, he was allowed. He was allowed to go. Anyway. But it was that experience. And you described that when you were introducing me. Thank you. It just, I had a different, I had an eco handbag line at that point, but I was what we call the DA in the family, the designated adult. So I live in Los Angeles. I've been here for years, but the family homestead was Buffalo. So going back and forth, and for obvious reasons, the handbag line took a hit. And so it was, well, do I resurrect this? And it's such a cutthroat business. Or do I do something else? And I loved what I was learning about later life and its journey. Plus, I realized it was a huge business opportunity. You got 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every year. That's through 2032. And over the course of 40 years, that population is going to double. And I realized the market was just huge, and I was drawn to it. So I launched Clear Home Solutions 10 years ago and never looked back. And I've had so much fun with the podcast because the part is keep, how to move your mom and be on speaking terms afterwards. And later life living, I'm really glad that we're to the beta launch stage. We're going to launch this because that's really where older adults and their families will be able to go to find the trusted professionals they need for all of later life's challenges. It is a challenge. You need some courage to go through that. Yeah.
I mean, it's key because there's so many, there's scams, there's all these things, like, how do you trust? And like, I live in a neighborhood where we're probably almost the youngest in the neighborhood. It's a very small neighborhood, so it's a lot of retirees, and they talk about like, oh, I have this book and it's got all the people I use to be my plumber, my roofer. I constantly ask them, well, who did you use, right?
Yeah.
And I love where you're kind of going with like, how do you help people find those right connections that come with a recommendation?
Yeah. Yeah. And whoever is listening, I don't care what age you are, because I'm assuming you're an adult, start
Mhm.
planning now.
Yeah.
Especially if you have children, get your estate planning, get your estate plan together, get your healthcare directive together,
Hmm.
and really start getting some long-term care insurance. The younger
Yeah.
you start, the less expensive it'll be, and sometimes that comes in handy when you're younger. You could have a bad accident, be in a coma, or just be seriously injured and need help. So, start planning now,
Yeah.
please. And people don't really understand just how many different services are available. Of course, we all need plumbers, electricians, etc. But what about estate planning attorneys, probate attorneys,
Hmm.
family law attorneys? Because there's a huge trend towards great divorce, and that's just in the legal realm. What are the different kinds of senior living accommodations available? There's all kinds, including remaining at home, but you want to have it ready for aging in place,
Yes.
making it comfortable and safe. Also, finance and insurance. I mentioned long-term care insurance, but also financial advisors, especially those who really understand the costs of that go into living a long and great life.
Right.
Very important. Nutritionists. Um, I'm trying to think of all my categories. I should know this off the top of my head.
But it's you have your board of directors basically because you every aspect of your life in your youth, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, whatever you want to classify as being your youth, you need to have those same type of board of directors for the long haul that will
Yeah,
help you get to the long haul. That's why I love how you talk about nutrition and health, and there's a mental wellness aspect to it as well.
I can tell you it's really people in their 50s, late 40s to early 60s where
Hmm.
you start to see this divergence. You can tell, especially with once they are older in their 80s or 90s, who has had a positive approach to life. And
Hmm.
again, mind you, there are certain diseases that people can get, and that I'm talking about people who haven't had to deal with that.
Yes.
But they've have a positive view on life. They've paid attention to their health. They embrace it, have a very positive attitude versus the people, and these are the people who tend to be miserable in later life, those who have a very negative attitude, those who don't take care of their health, who don't have really great relationships and really I don't see the glass as half full. I see it as full.
Hmm.
My glass is full. I'm
Yeah.
here, I'm healthy, because 'cause I'm 61, we talked about that. And, it's funny when you're talking about whatever.
This is amazing because I would not have put you at 61. I was
Well,
like,
that's
when
thank
we were talking
you.
about cool beans, I'm like, we have to be from the same like age like bracket.
Yeah, part of it is I just got lucky genetically, that's part of it, but also I've taken just focused on
Yeah.
first of all, the machine that
Yep.
nature has granted us, our bodies, but and also I really do have I've really worked on creating a great attitude. I'm a
Mhm.
very content person.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that I don't have those negative moods every so often, but I know how to manage them and they don't get out of control. But it's funny when you were saying, whatever's young to you, 20s, 30s, 40s, and I was thinking 60s.
Yeah.
I still feel young and vibrant. I have a friend who's talking about finally selling her company, Concepts for Livings, to Pomerantz. She's gonna sell it and finally retire at the age of 80.
Wow.
And I know plenty of people who are still working in their 80s, even early 90s, because they're still in really good shape.
Right. Because they want to, not because they have to.
Right. Well, yeah, right. The people that I know, yes.
Mhm.
But again, that's why you want to start financial planning as
Yes.
soon as possible and start setting things aside, setting money aside, and just planning and really thinking about, well, yeah, how do I want to live at the end of my life? Even how do I want to leave this life?
Mhm. Yeah.
Think about burial and that sort of thing, or not. There are different options
Right.
at the end. and really recognizing that our lease in these bodies, it's very short when you really think about it. And it's recognizing that it's finite. That's one of the reasons I used to do humanitarian work down in Chiapas, Mexico in the aftermath of the Zapatista rebellion. Plus, I'd been with my mother at the moment she passed. And
Yeah.
so I had, at times in the human rights thing, I was definitely in danger. And so I had to make peace with the fact that there's an end. And honestly, my life improved so much when I realized that,
Yes.
because every day is a gift. And just, I don't believe in regret. Why bother with regret? That's ridiculous. If you want to do it, do it. And that's how I live my life. And if you don't want to do it, then let it go. Don't
Yeah.
do it. Let it go. Do something else. But just accepting that, it's so important. Everything has an end. And I remember talking to my own father about it. And it really turned into a beautiful conversation.
That's
And
awesome.
And one thing that you have to keep in mind in a company is that when someone's parents have that shift in their lives, it affects every generation of the family, everyone in the family. And especially if it's something sudden, like a broken hip or a
Yep.
stroke or a heart attack, whether it's your parent or it's someone who is working for you, like who reports to you, distraction becomes a huge thing because it's literally life or death in those situations. So suddenly there's all these issues that have to be solved. People don't know where to turn. People remember being 5 years old, so we understand with children what children need.
Right.
You and I don't remember being 95. The only people who do are 96 and older. So people don't think about it. Our culture just doesn't believe in talking about later life, which is a shame because it can be so rich.
Yeah.
But when that happens, then especially if the parent lives out of town, but even if the parent is local, suddenly there needs to be care. Who's going to be watching them at the hospital? Because you need an advocate when you're in the hospital. And oftentimes, even when you're seeing doctors, there needs to be time off for that. And then finding the services that are available. And you're lucky if you have siblings you can count on. Remember, I mentioned the DA in the family, the designated adult. It often, especially I'm sure with a lot of your listeners, they are probably the DAs in their families.
Right.
And so just with your own distraction or with your colleague, you're not completely present. You're sleep deprived, not only because you're probably not getting as much sleep, but because you can't sleep. You can't fall asleep, or you wake up, or it's a really light sleep because you're so tense and worried. People don't recognize just how much adult children suffer during this time period. They don't recognize it. And one of the things I talk to my staff about is when you do have an adult child caring for the parent, to really say thank you to them and recognize that, tell them that you recognize they're going through a lot. And usually, in my experience, that person will say, "Oh, well, it's my parents." I said, "No, hang on. You are going through a lot right now.
Yeah.
People don't recognize it, but you are." And they're kind of relieved to have someone else really recognize it and say that to them. So if it's you, make sure that the person you report to or those who report to you understand what's going on. Try to see if other colleagues can do some of the work for you, maybe delegate a bit more if you are able to. I know that's not always possible. You may have to take some vacation days. And now, at least in California, I'm not sure if it's nationwide, but in California, you can take sick days if you are caring for someone else, like a parent or a child. You can take some sick days. But that's still money you're not making. That's lost income frequently, unless you do have enough sick days. But sometimes you just have to take a day off because somebody needs something. It's important that companies recognize this, and most companies don't. And one of the another reason I created Later Life Living for so many reasons. It can benefit so many people, including companies, because it would be smart if they're human resources people. Mind you, we're not wide yet. We're going to start in Southern California. We're just beta launching, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
That they have access to a group of providers that they can trust. And ideally not just one person who's a realtor specializing in senior in working with older adults and their families, but at least two or three, because you don't want to be legally responsible in case that
Right.
person doesn't do a great job or something like that. But having that list of resources sooner than later is so important.
Yeah. And I love what you were talking about from if you have a team, you're at work and you have a team that's underneath you, having that grace, even though you might not be going through that experience, it goes a long way with team and culture of your
Mhm.
team. Because I think of it as, I don't like people when they say it's my work family. No, it's my work community. And because we're a community, we have different roles that maybe we have to lean into at different times to support others. And that could be an aging parent. It could be a caregiver of any sort, right?
Mhm.
So we have a lot of spouses of veterans, and those veterans,
Oh,
the
yeah.
spouse becomes a caregiver,
Yes.
and sometimes that gets ignored too. So it's like
Yeah.
you get to know your team and what they're going through at home. It gives you empathy, and then you can start leading with grace as a whole team. And
Yeah,
it's really
I'm
cool to
sorry I
see.
interrupted.
No, it's really cool when you see that team work
Oh.
together as a community to help others, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one reason we love doing the senior I love the senior move management work, and so
Yeah.
does my staff. I've got the best staff I've ever had. And they really get that what they're doing is easing a burden. Even once in a while when we have a challenging client, shall we
Hmm.
say, at least you can still go home and just know that you've really eased somebody's burden, even if they really don't recognize it or say anything.
You've done it.
It's really heart-filled work.
Yeah.
And so is working with older adults and their families in any way. And you talk about teams. First of all, I want to say to managers, business owners, what have you, I highly recommend having a presentation about this sooner than later,
Hmm.
about the number of all the different kinds of services available, so that people have a sense of just how much help they can get building actually their own teams
Hmm.
around taking care of their parent or their
Yeah.
grandparent or their
Right.
grandparent, and just reckon because there are pet walkers and pet sitters specifically for older adults, especially if they're in communities.
Yeah.
There are, again, nutritionists. There are not only caregivers, but also these wonderful people called care managers. Also, they call themselves aging life specialists, but that doesn't really say what they do. They really oversee the general care. So they often pull teams together. So they'll bring in the caregivers.
Yeah.
If somebody needs uh out here in California, it's called a conservator. Everybody else calls them
Uh-huh.
guardians. Um, if they need a guardian if they can recommend somebody, estate planning attorneys, senior move managers, people to downsize, aging in place consultants, that sort of thing. All kinds of different services that are available that people aren't aware of. And
Yeah.
also they'll get a sense of the process when certain people should be brought in. Like I say, estate planning attorneys as soon as possible. Same thing with the financial advisor.
Yep. That was the first thing my husband and I did when we got married.
For you. Good for
Like,
you. And long-term care insurance, yes.
like we don't have an estate yet, but we're gonna get one. So you've led teams, you've built teams from scratch, you've built companies from scratch. What is maybe a piece of advice that you would give to a new manager on how to either directly or indirectly influence the team to do what you need them to do?
For one thing, well, first of all, hire carefully. And
Mhm.
if this person is thrust upon you, have a long talk, try to get a sense of their strengths and weaknesses. My dad, who ran a company very successfully back in Buffalo back in the day, um, he had a great saying. He said, "You don't know who you've got for 6 months."
Oh,
And it
that's good.
isn't
That's
that
so
good?
true. Yeah.
So
Even
true.
if you're the one that hired him, you won't know for 6 months.
You
Yeah.
don't. You don't. And also, in relationships, same thing. You really don't know. So it's important to set them at ease as well as possible. Make sure they get training. Make sure that those who are working with them feel comfortable. Make them feel comfortable and empowered to let you know what's going on, especially if they're trouble. I've really had to encourage my staff over the years because frequently when they start with me, they'll say, I don't want to be a tattletale. And I'm like, no, I can't help fix a problem unless I know about
Yep.
it. So now my staff is very comfortable letting me know, especially when somebody new. It's like, I think they need more training in this, or they could handle this better, or they were fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially at this task or that another one. So making sure that they know you are not going to tell somebody, oh, Mariana told me that you
Mhm.
XYZ. But rather, I'm getting some feedback, and let's kind of talk about this one process. How are you going about it right now? And maybe there could be a little more training. Here's what I'd recommend.
Yeah.
And also empower the person who might have said something, or like if for senior move management, they're the new people. We call them CHS, for Clear Home Solutions Associates, and they're project managers. And
Okay.
actually, I don't have project coordinators right now, but that's kind of a middle position. But the project managers, they know, they should train the people who are working with them, who are not at their level, and also those who are new or at that initial level, that they can ask the project managers for help. And also they know I'm accessible. Now, mind you, I'm a small business. I mean, it is
Mhm.
a shame how things get so siloed as businesses get bigger. But it is so important to make those people feel empowered in the field, to let you know what's going on, and also to constructively critique the work of anybody, especially when they're new.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. When you create that environment where people can trust
Mhm.
that it's safe for them to share, it's amazing what happens. And you mentioned it takes 6 months to figure out like who the person really is that you hired, but it also takes 6 months for that person to figure out who you are. And
Exactly.
and
Yes.
realize like Marty's going to be consistent. She says that I can come and ask her anything. Well, if I ask you once, I'm good. And I ask you twice, I'm good. But on the third time, every time anybody asks the third time, they get bopped in the nose. They get trained. I'm not going to ask again. I'm not going to come with my other problem because I'm afraid I'm going to get bopped in the nose, right? Like it's like training a dog. So, not that I would hit my dog in the nose, so don't.
No, I would
You
never
know what
think
I
that
mean?
of you. I would never think that of you. I will tell you, I had, a new staff member who, wanted to talk to me about something. We had a great conversation. In this case, she was working in a hoarding situation because we are hoarding specialists.
Mhm.
And it was the person she was dealing with. She just felt so bad for them. And so she was kind of taking on the situation, taking it home with her. And so that's some training, helping her shift her perspective a little bit, still be
Yeah.
empathetic, but recognize that's what she's there to solve. Well, then, and I said, I'm always here. Then about 10 days later, she contacted me about something else. And then about a week later, something else. And the things she was asking me about really were somebody else's purview.
Yeah.
And I often have to say this to clients too. I'm not the one you want to ask about billing. It's our bookkeeper. Or about, if it's the contract, something legal, yes, ask me. That's yeah, we all
Yeah.
know what we're in charge of. We're not siloed. But like with this new employee, I had to explain, you want to talk to Elizabeth about that because I don't know, it's delegated to her and she does a great job.
Yeah.
And I am so happy to say I went on a real vacation this summer, and
Wow.
actually the summer before, because I could leave. And mind you, I checked in, I looked at emails
Yeah.
and things like that in the evenings, but really it just ran itself.
That's awesome. That means
And
you've
that's all.
created a team that understands your purpose and vision,
Mhm.
and they've got the values associated with that they can make decisions and not be like, well, let me wait the week until she comes back from vacation or whatever the time
Mhm.
frame is. They're enabled. And that's
Yes.
that's important, whether or not you're a small business or you're a giant Fortune 50 company. Every individual team needs to have that ability to have that enablement. That's so
It's so
critical.
important, and also to remember your own pleases, thank yous, and you're
Yes.
welcome.
Yes.
So important, and really give the thumbs up when they do a great job. Amazing job. That's fantastic. I often, especially when it's really been a slog through a tough job like a hoarding situation or a really difficult project, I'll send an Amazon gift card or something just to surprise them or
Yeah.
something like that. People, I know I appreciate that. It's so important to really see them as people, and especially if they're going through the struggle with an older parent. Sending flowers or
Mhm.
food or something like just a little something goes such a long way. Just a
Yeah.
little something because they're especially if they have kids, and let's face it, especially if they're women,
Mhm. Yeah.
because honestly, it's not just the childcare that usually falls so much to women, but also the elder care.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially if you're in that it's called the sandwich generation where you have children and parents that you have to care for. I heard somebody recently say the panini generation because you have to squish the panini, and that's really what it's about. It really, really is. It's difficult. If you're a single parent, oof,
Yeah.
or an only child on top, it's just so challenging.
Yeah. And there's politics at work, there's politics within the family. And you
Mm.
talked about the DA, but then you got the others that aren't or might think they are. And it's there's all kinds of dynamics, and being able to have some grace. And sometimes it's just like you should listen more than speak. Like there's all those things, right?
Oh my god. Oh, yeah, yeah, and,
So
if they
important.
if they start crying in the office because what
Mhm.
they're going through, I've had people
Yeah.
apologize to me, and I say, "Never apologize for tears."
Right.
Because they're not look, there are people who try to manipulate with tears, but
Yep.
most of us don't, and
Yep.
especially this huge shift in their lives. You have to realize this kind of thing, it's really one of, if not the biggest shift in the life of the family. When
Yes.
that older generation is now on their way out, for lack of a better way to put, boy, was that a graceless way to put that. But they're not gonna be here much longer.
Yeah.
And so suddenly you or your colleague, they're the generation that suddenly has to take over.
Yep.
Very, very daunting. Needs to
Yeah.
be addressed at work. It really needs to be addressed.
I love it. I think it is something that everybody, and you have multiple generational teams. It might be somebody on your
Yeah.
team, right? And
Yeah.
that it's not maybe not their parent, but maybe them, or they're dealing, like you said, with a spouse's parent. So it happens. It's going to happen to all of us at some point in time.
Yes, it will.
I
Yes,
mean,
it
that's
will.
one thing that is inevitable to everybody. But
And oftentimes it can be the grandchild
yeah,
who ends up having to step in, because I was just talking to somebody actually about a week or two ago. They're having to step in because the siblings don't get along.
yeah, yeah. And there's not a plan, if there's not an estate plan, if there's not a goodwill, if there's not all those things, and then it
Mhm.
gets all drawn out. So I know we're kind of getting close to time, but I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
And that is, if you could go back, Marty, 10 years or even 20 years, what advice would you give yourself?
I just say, "You've got this.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this. You can do it." Don't just do it, and not twofold. You've got this, and you're not alone.
Oh, that's big.
And you're not alone. People want to help. So long as you're a halfway decent person, people will help you.
Yes, that's true. That
Yeah.
is true. And you
Yeah.
have to be open to help, but people are always willing.
They really are, and especially if you ask, if you're just polite about it. And one of
Yes.
my I don't wanna call it a trick, but one of my ways to to put people at ease, especially when I'm asking a big favor.
Yep.
I start out by saying, "I'm gonna ask you something, and it is fine if you say no." I won't have a problem. But I figure, you know, I can ask just about anything so long as it's clear I'm comfortable with hearing no. And
Right.
then I'll make the big ask. And more often than not, far more often than not, the majority of the time, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But at times I have had people say, I can't do that. I said, I get it. I get it. And make them feel comfortable, because
Right.
then usually what happens with that is I'll say, okay, I can't really do that, but here's an idea, or here's someone else I can introduce you to.
Correct. And the opportunities come.
And it's just being respectful that way, because at some point when you become successful, somebody's going to come to you and they're going to want something. And, you know, how will you want to be approached? This is
Right.
empathy. When you're working with older adults and their families, you have to have empathy built in. Whenever I'm interviewing somebody to join our company, that is the one thing. They call it a soft skill. That's the hard skill.
Yeah.
You can't learn that.
Yeah.
You know, the soft skill is the technical skill that I can figure out and you can teach me.
Yeah. That's why I always say you hire for culture, not
Oh,
necessarily for skills. Because if you got the right culture, you can teach people the skills. So if for
yep,
your culture, the key is that you've got to be able to have that empathy.
yep.
To your point, you're not going to be able to teach Joe Schmo off the street to have empathy.
No. Can
And
you step
that's
into somebody else's shoes, and can you feel for them and recognize, like, for example, if somebody's obsessed, I don't have a pencil handy, but they're obsessed with this glass
yeah.
and they don't want to let go of it. This is, you know, talking about working with them to sort it out
Yes.
with my colleagues. And I tell them, deal with the glass. If they're that obsessed with it, fine.
Right.
And then you can say, what's the story behind that? So they get to tell the story, because once
Right.
they might let go. But also to say, I know this is hard. This is hard. How are you feeling right now? Because
Yeah.
then that taps into the bigger issue, and they will start talking about what's really bothering them, what's
Yeah.
really upsetting them. And that's the way also when your colleague is going through that, and maybe they're very short with people or they seem distracted. It's like, what's going on? You know, what's going on?
Right.
What's going
Right.
on? And then just be open to hearing it and letting them, again, listen. Just listen.
I love it. This has been fantastic. And I know there's people that are listening. They're like, oh my God, I love Marty. I love her energy. I want to learn more. I want to know more about what she's doing, or I want to work with her or whatever.
Yeah, thank
Right.
you.
So I'm going to put up on the screen. You got a few websites, you're on LinkedIn, but what's
Mhm.
probably the best way to tell the listeners, hey, this is where they should go? Obviously, check out the show notes, but what would you call out as be the best way for people to reach you?
Well, on Clear Up Solutions, you can just go and you can fill out the contact form, and
Yep.
I will see that. Again, small business. My later life living is really kind of, shall we say, for now, closed to the public because we're testing.
Yep.
But you can also comment on howtomoveyourmom.com. LinkedIn's fine. Also on Facebook, you can contact me that anyway. And it's I'm easy to search because I have such a weird name. So there you go.
Kind of like me. It's all good.
Exactly.
Well, this has been really, really cool. I've enjoyed it. I actually wrote down some notes because I that's what I do.
Me too. Me
Yeah,
too.
I do. I mean, I'm old school. I got my paper, I got my pen, but some of the nuggets I wrote down that really resonated with me was having empathy and compassion is key, not only for when you're planning what you want for your later life, but also with an aging adult that you may have to step in and help, but also with a team, right?
Yeah.
That resonates regardless. That you should plan now for later life care. Just like
Yes,
in
please.
business, you got to have a plan. So, do you have a plan for your life? That financial plan and a spiritual plan, a health plan, with all the things, right?
All of it. Yeah.
And then the quote around that you don't really know who you've got for 6 months.
Thank you, Dad, right? Thank you, Dad. Yeah, I couldn't get him to understand what Facebook was, but when it came to handling personnel, he was quite the sage, the wise sage about it.
Which makes sense, right? You want to hire carefully. You want to make sure that you're hiring for that culture fit, because there's some things that you just can't teach.
Yeah.
And your advice to your younger self was, hey, you've got this and you're not alone. which means if you're not alone, there's people that you can ask for help. There's people you can lean on. There's those board of directors that you should have around you. And this has been fantastic. Thank you again for your time and joining us on Might in Motion.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into Might in Motion. If you learned something about motivation, momentum, mindfulness, or might, please like, comment, and share. Thank you.